Okay, so let's now see how do we interact with the web page using the DOM. So since we are talking about a new topic, I again have created a new dom.js file so that we can keep the content separate. And again, I have linked that to the index.html using the script tag. And as for the h1, we have the same h1 again, but this time I have added a class as well as an id to this h1, and in a moment I will show you why. So let's now do some DOM manipulation. So remember how in the presentation we understood that everything is contained within the document object. So it would be nice if we try to log out that document object and do some manipulation to that. By manipulation, I actually means we will be figuring out that what that document object actually contains. So if you say console.log document, because we know document is the starting point, right? If I save this, then if I expand this part here, now you see that on document we have many properties: location, URL, bg color, body. I mean, we have a lot of properties. So instead of going on all of the properties one by one, it would be really nice if you try to call few of them. For example, you see that, by the way, you can see title is advanced concepts in JavaScript, and if I go little upwards, because that is the title, you see the title is advanced concepts in JavaScript. Then we have head that contains all the data of head. Domain name is this one, 127.0.0.1 localhost, and then we have doc type is latest. So you can call these properties on this object and it will give you the same output. Okay, so if I say domain, right, I can say domain, you'll see we get this domain name. If it would have been Google, if you try to do the same for the Google, it will give you google.com. okay, so this is domain. Same, I can say title as well, so it will give you the title, advanced concepts in JavaScript. Similarly, you can also access head and it will give you everything that is within the head tag. So meta, then we have title, and then we have this style as well. Okay, and then you can also call the body and it will give you all the body. So there you go, you see the entire tag that is contained within this body. Okay, even the script, but we are not going to go into depth because this is actually executing the script. And then how about calling all, because we have this all as well. Now when you say all, then it is going to give you all the tags that is currently available in your index.html file. So HTML, inside HTML we have head, meta, 3 meta tags, 1 title tag, style, body, that we have one h1 with an id of heading dash primary and a class of heading dash primary. Then we have script tags, and then it is continuing, so the length is 11. Okay, and do we have few more methods? Let's quickly check. If I expand, yeah, sometime it can happen. Okay, so you'll have to refresh few times so that you can see the actual methods or properties that is inside this document object. So yeah, you have base URI will give you the complete path of the URL, so this one, entire path. Okay, and then char set is UTF-8. so this actually contains all the details that is rendering here on the web page. Okay, all right, but this is not what we are actually going to get into. So this document object actually gives us all the methods that we can use to do all of these 4 tasks, like accessing the element, manipulating the data, creating element, and adding event listeners to that. Okay, so let's now do some real DOM manipulations. So the first thing is that in order to do something on an element, you'll have to fetch it. For example, if I want to do something on this h1, for example, if I click on h1, then something should happen. But before that, before clicking, you will have to get this h1 from this web page. Now there are multiple ways of getting data from the web page, so let's now see that. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to write the number 1. I'm going to say that I can say get element by tag name. Very simple tag name. Okay, so this is a method that we get on the document object. So again, I can say document. So the first one is getting the element by the tag name itself. For example, if we have this h1, we can get the data with the h1 itself. Okay, so if you want to access this h1 from the web page, you can get the h1 by its tag name. If you have a paragraph, you can get the data of paragraph using the tag name itself, that is p. Okay, so here I can say document dot the method is get element, and you can see we are getting suggestions. Do you want to use id, class name, tag name? We want this elements by tag name, okay, and this is actually elements, not element, okay. Get elements by tag name. Now call this, and here you'll have to pass the name of the tag in the string format. For example, I want to say h1. So now this get elements by tag name will go to this entire HTML and will figure out all the tag that is h1, and then it will store that into this line. Now to store this into this line, we'll have to store this in a variable. So I can say const, I'll say all h1 equals to document.get elements by tag name h1, okay. Now if I say console.log all h1, you'll see we will get h1. This is a collection because it gives you all the elements with similar type, okay. So if I expand this, you see we have just one element at 0th index, because this actually returns you an array. So you can see, there you go, you have this h1. Now if you repeat this h1, let's duplicate it. If I duplicate this h1, now you'll see you will have a collection of 2. So if you expand this one, you see on 0th index you have this h1, and first index you have this h1, okay. This is very simple. I'm taking it completely simple. I'm explaining it in a more layman term. Now if you want to access only the first one or only the second one, you can access it using its indexing position. So you can say, hey, I want to access the second h1, so you'll have to call the first index because array starts with 0. If I save this, you'll get the second h1. Although both of them seem similar, there is no difference, but you can understand that this is the second h1, okay, because that's how array works. So this is one way, getting elements by the tag name. And then we have by id. So we can get the element by id. So again I can say document dot get element, and this time it is element, not elements, element by id, and now call it. Now always remember that call these methods name accurately. Slight mistake and everything will be problematic. So if you say names is not, get elements by tag names is not a correct method. If you save it, you see it says type error, document.get elements by tag names is not a function. Tag name is a function, not names. So always be vigilant towards this thing, okay. So now this is get element by id, not elements by id. And if you want to read, you can read. It says returns a reference to the first object with the specified value of the id. Now of course we already have applied this id, so we are going to take this id, the name of the id, that is heading dash primary, and here we are just going to pass that. And again I'm going to save that to a variable. I will say h1 with id, okay. So now we are going to get the h1 which has this id applied to it. So I can say h1 with id. If I save this, you get 2 h1 because we have the same h1. Similarly, we can also create a paragraph. Why not? Let's quickly do that. I will say paragraph, and let's use emmet. I will say para. I am a para. I'm gonna take this id and paste it here. I'll say para, and let's log out the para. So the paragraph that has this id, we are going to hold that into this para variable, and then we are consoling that right here. So if I save, you get, we have this para, okay. Now this output we are getting from this line, from line 7, okay. Now this is from id, and of course we can access from class name as well. So same way we can also say document dot get element by class name. I'm gonna call it, and here we'll have to pass the class name. So this time we also have a class name applied to it, but let's create a new anchor tag. I'm gonna say anchor. I will say main underscore link, doesn't matter the class name. I'm gonna say click me. Now if you want to hold this anchor tag right here, you can see here click me, you can hold the value of this using the class name, okay. So you can say right here main dash link, and I'm going to say link equals to this one, and now I'll say cl link. I'm gonna save it. So there you go, you get HTML collection of this link. Now this is get elements by class name. Do we have something like element by class name? If I save this, no, it says no, we do not have get element by class name. We have get elements by class name, okay, and it returns an array collection of the similar type of data. So HTML collection, if I expand this one, you see we have a dot main link. Okay, so the element that has this class applied to it, it is getting returned, getting hold into this link, and then we are accessing that. After that we have query selector and query selector all. So here I'm going to write query selector, and this is the most used. Okay, so now I can say document dot query, you see query selector and query selector all, that was getting suggested. Now query selector is really very important for us to understand, because here you can pass the query. Actually, for example, if you want to access a class, actually you want to access a element with the tag name, you can pass the tag name. If you want to access an element using this its ID, you can pass that. If you want to access an element using its class name, you can do that as well. Okay, so query selector literally takes the query that you want to fetch for. For example, I want to fetch the element, let's say how about, let's comment this one out. Okay, commenting this one out, I'll say I want to fetch the h1 that has a class of heading dash primary. Okay, so here we'll have to say heading dash primary, but not like this. We'll have to pass this dot as well. Okay, so that we can say that, hey query selector, I want you to fetch the element that has this class applied to it. Okay, and then I can say const, I'll say main heading, because I know this is the main heading. Now I can say cl main heading. I'm gonna save it, and now you see we are getting this h1 that has this heading dash primary applied to it. Okay, now again, if you want to fetch an element with its ID, you can again say that now I want you to fetch the element which has this ID applied. So the same ID is applied to this h1 as well, so there will be no changes reflected here. We are going to get the same data outputted here. Okay, and similarly, if you want to fetch data using the tag name, you can do that. You can say h1. How about accessing anchor? Why not anchor? Why always h1? So anchor, and there you go, you see this anchor tag. Okay, so this is query selector, and similar to this we have query selector all, but query selector returns you array. Query selector all returns you all the queries that you have for a specified search. Okay, so it returns you the first matched element. If you have another anchor tag, for example, you see if I duplicate this anchor tag 3 or 4 times, it will still return you only the first one. It is not going to return you all the anchor tags. It searches the document, and whatever the first data it finds true, it returns you that. So when you want to select every data that has the same class applied to it, you can use query selector all. Okay, so now I can say, why not document dot query selector all, and here I can say that, hey query selector all, select all the query of this anchor tag, and I'm gonna say const, I'll say all anchors, and here I'm going to give it the class name actually. Okay, so main dash link, I can do that as well, this one as well, there will be no problem. If I say, it will still return us the array console.log all anchors. If I save this, you'll see it will return node list of 5 data, all of the main dash link. Okay, now I can say that I don't want to fetch all the query using the tag name itself, but with the class name. So I can say dot main __ link, and then it will give you the same data here. You see this? Okay, so you are getting all the data with this class applied to it. So main __ link. So these are some fine 5 ways of how we can access data from this web page. And after that, we are going to talk about how can we manipulate the data of the elements. Now before we move on to understand how to manipulate the data of elements, I want to give you a little clarification on query selector and query selector all, and which one to use. So notice how when you say query selector on anchor tag, it is returning you the first anchor tag. So this is true. Query selector all gives you all of the instances of the selected query, but query selector only gives you the first instance of the selected query. So even if you say dot main __ link, this query selector will only return you the first instance of the element that has this main __ link class applied to it. So if you save this, you will see there is no changes in the outcomes. Whereas when you say query selector all dot main __ link, it returns you the complete array of all the elements that has this class applied to it. Okay, so right here you can see it. Now you can ask me which one to use. Well, very simple to understand. Again, if you want to fetch elements, all of the elements that has this class applied to it, you can use query selector. But in most of the cases, we do this query selector all when we have to style menu bars and do something like, for example, if inside a container we have all the images, we have, for example, we have 5 or 6 images and we want to style all of the images similarly, then we can access all the image using query selector all. It will fetch us all the images at once. And query selector is very simple. If you want to access data using the class name, using the ID, you can just use this query selector, because you are sure that it is going to give you only the element that you are asking for, and that too the first instance of it. So it is not going to give you the entire element. Okay, now about these get elements by class name, tag name, ID, I actually mostly use this elements by ID and this query selector. Okay, so these two I mostly use, query selector and elements. Again, you can use this get elements by tag name, get elements by class name, but the thing is that query selector gives you additional control. Here you don't have to worry about if it is a class or it is an ID. You can just pass the query and it is going to fetch you the element, whereas when you are going to use get elements by class name and get elements by tag name, then you'll have to be pretty sure that, okay, so since we are calling this get elements by tag name, then here I will have to pass a specific tag name. But do you really think that if you pass this h1, then only that h1 is going to be on your web page? For example, what if you want to access a div? Now there can be many divs on your document, so if you say get elements by div, then all of the div is going to be held in this variable. That could be actually terrible. So instead of using elements name, class name that actually has a more semantic meaning, try to use this ID, because ID cannot be repeated, it only exists once, or query selector. Okay, so this is the reason why I mostly prefer to use get element by ID, query selector and query selector all. Okay, so I was almost on my way to teach you how to manipulate the data of elements after getting it. But then thankfully I took a break because I almost burned out myself, and then after recovering I was doing something on my personal project, and then I realized I am missing something, and that is not teaching you the real world implementations of some of DOM methods to fetch data based on some logic. So let's now learn that, and after that we will move on to understand how to manipulate the data of elements. So not always we access data with these methods, query selector all, get elements by ID, get elements by tag name. Sometimes we also have to access data based on the logic. For example, what if you want to figure out the parent of a children or all the elements of the parent? How would you do that? For that, you will use specific methods. So this time I have created a very simple generic div. I have given it a class of container that holds a simple h1 that also has a class container underscore underscore heading. A very simple div, right? Now what if I want to access the parent of this h1? How can we do that? So by naked eye you can figure out that, okay, so the div is the parent of this h1. This is very simple, but when you will be writing real world web apps, then these data can be complex. Then figuring out the parent or child, the relationship, will be little tough. For that you'll have to use these logical methods. So let me show you. For example, if I want to figure out the parent of this h1, first of all I'm going to get this h1. Okay, so I'm just going to say const heading equals to document dot query selector, and here I'm going to pass, what is the class? I think main heading, container underscore underscore heading. So I'm going to say container underscore underscore heading. So in English sentence we are saying that, hey, query selector, get me the element that has this class applied to it. Okay, and then after this we are going to say console.log heading. So the heading, now we want to fetch the parent of heading, right? So now we can say parent node. So parent node is the method, well, not like this, but like heading dot parent node. So this parent node method will actually return you the parent of this heading. So if you save it, you see you get container. Similarly, if you want to figure out all the childrens that a parent has, you can use the child nodes property to it. Okay, so for example, again we'll have to hold the container, so I'm just going to say container and not this one. Okay, let's delete it. Container, we are holding the container, and then after getting it here, we are just going to say container dot child. This time this is nodes, okay, child nodes. So if you save it, it is going to give you all the child of this container. There you go, node list. If you expand, you see we have text and then the h1 itself and then one more text. Now you can be confused, well, we just have this simple h1, then why are we getting this 3 data in the node list, text 1 2? Okay, so the reason is that you see this line break. This line break is also added to the node list. Okay, so if you expand this at 0 index, you can see that the node value is /n, so this is also counted. Okay, so that's why you are getting at 0 index this text, and then h1.container at first index you get the actual element. If you want to access the 0, you can actually do that. How about doing it? I haven't done it earlier, so let's do it now. What if I say child nodes at 0 index? What will it return us? Let's say it is returning us this text. Okay, if I expand again, the value is /n. Okay, so yeah, you can pretty much guess for yourself. And let's go ahead, and now I'm going to show you a few more. These are, for example, if we have, let's say that after h1, how about creating an anchor tag? Okay, now I can say by now, very simple by now. Okay, I want to figure out that give me the siblings that are after a specific element. For example, I want to figure out all the siblings after this h1. I can use required method for that. So I can say, yeah, why not heading? We already have this heading. So I can say that, hey, heading dot I can say next sibling elements. So it's next element sibling, not next sibling elements. So if you say heading dot next element siblings, it is going to give you all the siblings of the heading. So anchor, so anchor is the next sibling. Okay, so you see we have this sibling. See, this is the parent. Okay, and then this is the children, this is the children. So the relationship between both the children contained within the parent is called siblings. So both of them are siblings. So your brother, your sisters, you call them siblings, right? This is your parent, and then you have your brother, and then you have your sister. Both of them are siblings. If you keep repeating this, you are going to get all of the parents. Well, actually you get only first anchor. And what if I do, how about getting a span? Lol. You still get only first siblings. So this, always remember that this next element sibling does not return you all of the sibling. So what if I say siblings? Do we have method for siblings? No, we do not have any methods for sibling. It only returns you the first sibling. Okay, so some practicals are worth doing straight away. And then same way you can also access the elements that are before an element. So I can say lol, I am before h1. Okay, and so if you want to figure out the elements that are before a specified elements, you can use previous element sibling. So now you can say give me all the previous element siblings of this h1. So it will give you all the span. You see this span. Okay, so yeah, these were few more ways of accessing elements based on some logical conditions. Next, now move up and try to understand how to manipulate the data of elements. Let's now talk about manipulating the data of the element. Let's say we want to change the content of this h1. So the first thing we will do is we will fetch the element from the web page and then manipulate it. So let's do it. Now let's go to index.html because I want to show you something. This time I have commented the div that had the class of containers so that we will have to deal with little code. Okay, so we won't be confusing ourselves too much. Now let's say that I want to manipulate the content of this h1. So to do that, first of all we will have to hold this h1 itself. So I'm just going to copy the heading dash primary class, and here I'm just going to say const head equals to document dot query selector, and here I'm just going to give it this class name with this dot. And now on this head we can call this inner HTML. So this is the method that gives you the ability to change the inner content of the element. So here I can define my text. So I want to say CodeBlock's JavaScript is amazing. Okay, now if I save this, now you see that the content got changed. Okay, similarly, if you want to add a stylings to it, you can do that. For example, if you want to add a background color to it, you can do that. You can simply say head dot style dot, and now you'll have to use the CSS property. So you want to change the background color, so you'll have to say background, and this time you do not say dash color. This is how you write in CSS specification, right? But when you are declaring properties to style an element in DOM, you use camel case notation. So every following word is capitalized. So here you'll have to say capital COLOR. Okay, so this is camel case notation. So instead of saying background dash color, you'll have to say background color in camel case notation. And now you can see that how tab 9 is suggesting us that, hey, do you want this property? Yeah, surely we do want. And now in the string you can define the color. So let's say I want orange. I'm going to save it. Now you see background of orange is applied to it. Similarly, if I want to increase the font size, I can say font size, and let's say 50 pixel, and now surely the font size increased. Now if you want to add additional styles to it, for example, if you want your own declared styles, you can do that. Let's go to index.html, and here let's declare a style. I'll say active, and I'm just going to change the color to be blue. Okay, and now I want to add this active class to this element. Okay, how can I do that? Very simple, we can do that. We'll have to say head dot class list dot add. By using class list dot add, you will be able to add a class on the element. Now here you just have to say the name of the class. Okay, this time you don't have to say dot. Okay, just say active. Now when I will save it, you see that the color of the h1 is now blue. If you go to elements, you will be able to see that h1 has two class. One is heading dash primary and one is active class. Okay, similarly, if you want to remove a class from this element, you can also do that. So you can say remove, you can call remove method, and then on that you will have to pass the class name that you want to remove. So let's say I want to remove heading dash primary. If I save this, now you see that heading dash primary is removed. Okay, so let's now do some advanced DOM manipulation. Let's now talk about advanced DOM manipulation. For example, so far we have manipulated the data that is already available in our DOM, like this h1. We created this h1 manually, but now we will learn how to create our own element using JavaScript. We are not going to create any element in this index.html itself. No, we are going to use JavaScript to create element. So let's say I want to create a div. So here I'm just going to declare a variable called as div, because that is eventually what we are going to create. Okay, now on the document object, we have a method called as create element. So pretty much you can guess it for yourself that what it does. So you can say create element, and then you call it, and inside this create element method, in the string format, you pass the name of the element that you want to create. So we want to create a div, right? So I'm going to call it div. So document.createElement will help you to create an element, and then we are saving the data on this div variable. Now if I save this, by simply doing this, we are not going to create any div. So if you check our elements inside the body, you won't see any div. The reason is that simply creating is not sufficient. We will have to actually push the location of this div. For example, we want this div to appear on our body, right? So we will have to push this div to our body, and for that we will have to fetch body as well. So here I'm going to say const body equals to document dot let's say query selector, and I want to fetch the body. Okay, so here I can say body, and on this body we have this method called as append child. So this method helps us to append an element on the described element. Okay, so here I can say div. Now if I save this, you will see we have a div. Now surely we do not have any content inside this div. Now let's create a paragraph and then push that paragraph inside the div. Okay, so here I can again duplicate this part and let's bring it here, and I'm just going to call it paragraph. We created a paragraph. Now since we created a paragraph, let's quickly give this some text as well. Okay, so I'm going to call inner HTML so that we can define the content for the paragraph. I will say I am a paragraph. Okay, and so now we are going to push this paragraph onto this div. So this time we are going to say div dot append child paragraph. Okay, now if I save this, you will see we will have one paragraph that is inside this div. Now this element we have created using JavaScript. See, we do not have anything called div that holds a paragraph. We created all of these elements using JavaScript. Okay, now if you want to have this div a class, you can again say div dot let's say class list dot add. I want to add a container class to it. I can say container. Okay, if I save this, now our div will have this container class. You see our div now has the container class. Similarly, if you want this paragraph to have some class, you can say p dot class list dot add. I will say container underscore text. Okay, I'm gonna save it. Now you see we have this container, and inside this container we have this paragraph which has a class of container underscore text. Now if you style this, then you will see that style will reflect here. The changes will reflect here. So I'm just going to copy this style, not style but the name of the class that we just added. Sometimes I myself fumble. Okay, now inside the style tag I'm just going to give some styling. So what should I do? How about increasing the font size? So I can say font dash size, and this time we are actually using the CSS, so we don't have to use the camel case notation. Okay, here I'm just going to say let's say 2 rem, that would be 32 pixel. Did you see that the font size increased? Let's say what text decoration to be underlined, Okay, you can see this. So now we are controlling the creation of the element using our JavaScript file. Isn't this amazing? We don't have to touch our HTML to create an element. We can create an element using this DOM. Okay, surely I can add a class to any element using this ClassList.add method. But what if I want to add an ID to it? How can I do that? Well, pretty easy. We can do that too, but this time you'll have to do it in a different way. This time you'll have to call set attribute method on the element. So on paragraph, since we are going to add ID on paragraph, we are going to call set attribute on this paragraph element. This receives two parameters, actually two arguments. Okay, the first one is the attribute that we want to define. So we want to define the ID attribute, and then in the second argument we can provide the value. So here we are just going to name it. So I'm going to say container dash para. Now remember, what are attributes? I have taught about attributes in my front-end development course. So attributes provides additional information to the element. Okay, now if I save this, now you will see our paragraph surely has an ID that is called as container dash para. So that's how you also add an ID to the paragraph. Now let's quickly see how to insert an image, since image also needs to have two attributes. One is source and one is alt tag. So it will be really fun to build that. Okay, so let's say I want to insert an image. I'm just going to call img equals to document dot create element img. So now I can say img dot src equals to I'm just going to provide an online link. You don't have to do this. I open unsplash.com and the first random image that I found, I just copied the image address and I just pasted it. Okay, now since image also has an alt attribute, I can say img.alt to be a random image. Okay, let's capitalize it, a random image. Now our image is ready, we just have to push it. So I'm just going to say, hey div append this image. Okay, if I save this, now you'll see our image will be here. So you can see this. So this is the random image that I copied. Now you can ask me that we are defining this source on this image as well as this alt on this image. Why are we doing this separately? We just learned about this method set attribute. Why are we not using this set attribute method? You can do that. So you don't have to do img.src. You can also do this. You can say img.set attribute. The first attribute is img for sure, actually source, not img, source, and then the value will be this link. Okay, you will see there will be no change. Okay, the only difference is that this set attribute can only have two parameters, actually two arguments. The one is the data itself, actually the what do we call it, attribute itself, and then second is the value. But image also contains an alt attribute. Then again for that you'll have to call img dot set attribute again, and then here you'll have to say this time I want this alt, and then alt will be random image. So if you do it, then you can see that how we'll have to repeat the method name twice. So the better is doing this, img.source equals to this one, img.alt is this one, and then append this image. If I comment this part, if I quickly get this into document, there will be no changes. Both of them are going to work fine. So you can see image has an alt tag of random text. Okay, this is completely optional. You can whatever you like, you can do that. Let me quickly get this one again so that I can show you the difference, which is null. So you can see that both of them have no difference at all. Let me quickly fix it little up. Let's now move forward to understand a little bit more. Now I'm going to tell you something. There is a drawback of using this append child method. So let me now show you that. I'm going to comment this code, and this time I have created a new div with parent class. Okay, and now I'm going to do something. So I got that parent div with this query selector, so this div itself, and then I created a new paragraph, and then we inserted this new paragraph few text. Okay, not few text but some text. Now I'm going to push this paragraph into the parent div. So I just have to say parent div dot append child this new para. Okay, I'm gonna save it. Now you will see that we will have this new paragraph inside this parent div. Okay, now I'm going to create one more paragraph. I will say const another para equals to document dot create element paragraph, and this paragraph will also have inner text of this is my second paragraph. Okay, now I'm going to append this another paragraph also into this div. So I'm going to say parent div dot append child another para. If I save this, now you will see that the newly inserted paragraph is appearing after the first paragraph. So this append child method creates the element after the first element. It means that if any element is already there in the container, and then if you create a new element, and then if you push that new element in the container, then that new element will always appear after the already created element. Now I may want this to happen, but what if we want to create the element at a specific position? For example, what if I want this paragraph to appear before this paragraph? Now I can do this. I can actually call this paragraph to be created first, then this. Now this will solve the problem. you will see if I expand this div, you will actually see that this is my second paragraph is appearing first, then this paragraph. This surely fixes the problem, but now we'll have to control the code manually. What if I tell you that there is another better way to fix it, and that by using another method which is called as insert adjacent element. This method gives you more control over where you want your element to be created. Okay, so the method name is insert adjacent element. Now this insert adjacent element method accepts two arguments. Okay, first one is the position and second is the element. Now let me show you the documentation. So if you say insert adjacent element, if you search for insert adjacent element MDN, the first link will get you at this web page. Okay, so here you can read, says this method interfaces inserts a given element node at a given position relative to the element it is invoked upon. So first one is the position, second one is the element. So the element that I want to insert, let's say another para. Okay, I want to insert another paragraph. Now where do I want to insert? I have four options: before begin, after begin, before end, after end. So before begin simply means that even before the target element itself. So the target element is div itself. So even before the div, not inside, but even before the div, this paragraph will be inserted. So if you say before begin, if I get you here, you will see that this paragraph is appearing even before the div. Okay, so similarly we have after begin as well. So if you say after begin, then after begin will fix the problem, then this paragraph will be the first children of this parent. So if you say after begin, now you will see that our paragraph will be created inside the parent and it is the first children of this parent. Okay, similarly we have two more position, before end and after end. So before end is just inside the target element after its last children. So very simple, before end will create it in the as the before end will simply make it the last children. Okay, so there you go, this is my second paragraph. Okay, and after end is very simple, just like before begin, after end will create after the div. So there you go, you see after the div we have this paragraph. Okay, great. So this is how you can control the position where you want to create your element. Let's now move forward, and the only thing that is now remaining for us to understand in DOM is understanding how to listen for multiple events. So let's now see that. Okay, and after all of this, finally we have to understand about events. Events are fired on the actions taken by the users. For example, clicking a button on the web page is an event. Hovering over an element is also an event. Moving the mouse like this one is also an event, or simply pressing the button on your keyboard like this one is also considered an event. Moreover, scrolling the web page or simply dragging and dropping something is also considered an event. So we have a lot of events in JavaScript. Now remembering all of these events is not a good choice. So it's better if we take a look at the documentation. So just make a search for event reference MDN and possibly click the first link, which will get you to the correct documentation for events on JavaScript. And here you can read, it says events are fired to notify code of interesting changes. So I just mentioned that events are fired on the actions taken by the users. Okay, now if you go little down, you can see event index. Here is the event type, their description and documentation. Now you don't have to get into all of this animation, asynchronous data. These are overwhelming data which I really do not find for a beginner to really involve their mind into. Okay, CSS transition, database, DOM mutation, drag and drop wheel, focus form, full screen. Let's go down because there we'll see the real events. There you go, event listing. So these are some events that we can use for our purpose. For example, drag event, drag end event. Okay, animation event, full screen event. I just told you that pressing buttons on keyboard is also considered an event. For that we have this key up event, key press event, key down event, okay, pointer event, and then we have animation blur event which we apply on input box, click event, copy. I mean, we have lots and lots of events. Yeah, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse move. Okay, if you go little more down, open event, load event, toggle event. We are going to see something similar to toggle in front-end development course, not in this one. So there I've exactly talked about something similar to toggle event. How do we toggle between classes? Submit event. This is one important event that we are going to talk about. This event is this event is applied on the form. Okay, now let me tell you in the beginning itself that you can see there are lots and lots of events, right? But we don't have to learn about all of these events, because even if you will develop high-end web apps, you will mostly use a handful of these events, such as click is mostly used. So when we click on a button, okay, mouse events, key press events, submit events, blur, these are some of commonly used events. Okay, so it is completely okay to not remember these events, and indeed in general we should not remember things in programming. We must understand the context of it, and fairly it is very simple for us because all the events works in a similar way. So if you understand about the working of one event, the rest you can figure on your own. You can just simply go to the documentation. For example, I can show you this submit event. If you open it, okay, so remember I told you that how we apply this submit event on the form. So you can read more about it, and here you can find the example as well. So here you can see the example. Okay, moreover, if you want to read about, let's say, click, and if you are having trouble finding here, just press Ctrl F. Since I'm on Mac, I'm going to press Command F, and here I'm going to say click, and not K but CLICK. Okay, and mostly since there are 8 searches, I'll have to click event. Okay, if I click it, here you will be able to read more about it. Okay, so add event listener click. When someone clicks a button, then this event will be fired. Okay, now let's see few of them on our own, and then we will move forward. Alright, so let's now see how we work with events in details. So these are few handful of events that we use mostly. So let's now talk about these one by one. So the click event is the most common one. So let's start with the click event. Now I have commented all of the previous code, and let's quickly delete this console.log statement as well. Now click is associated with a button. So when we click a button, then we are expecting something to happen. Okay, for that we'll have to create a button on our HTML. So in the document, I'm just going to create a button, and I'll give it an ID of btn, and I'll say click me. Okay, and let's go to DOM, and here we are just going to say const btn equals to document dot, because we need to select it, query selector, and we are going to select it with the ID. So the ID is btn. Okay, you can call it button as well. So button will be a more generic variable name. Okay, button. Now I want that when I click this button, then an alert should pop up here. Okay, now to do that, you can add an event listener on the button. So to use event, you'll have to add event listeners to the elements. So on the button, I can just call button, and then here I just have to say dot add, and you can see tab9 is already suggesting us that do you need add event listeners or add event listeners with click. Yeah, we need add event listener. So make sure to use the camel case, that's the correct variable name. Okay, so add, every letter is capitalized. Okay, every word actually is capitalized. So add event listener, and we'll have to call it. Now this takes 3 arguments. First one is the name of the event, so such as click, submit, key press, mouse events, then a function, and after that it also takes one more parameter that is called as script, use script, or actually it's called as use capture, which we do not have to talk about that much because that's completely optional. Okay, so here we are going to pass the type of the event. So the type of the event is click, because of course on button we are going to click it. Now my goal is to, when I click this button, then an alert should pop up. How can I do that? Well, for that, in the second argument, you'll have to define a function, and it's legit a function. So you'll have to create a function like this, and then here you define all the code that you want to execute once someone clicks the button. So here I just want to say that alert I was clicked. Okay, and now if I save this, come over here, and if I click this button, you'll see a pop-up that says I was clicked. And now to get rid of this, you just have to say OK. Similarly, you can also say console.log. So instead of this alert, you can say console.log, and now when I will click the button, you will see I was clicked. If you keep clicking it, you can see that this number keeps increasing. It does not print this I was clicked statement again and again. It just updates this number so that it can identify, it can actually tell you that okay, so you have clicked the button this number of times. Okay, let me zoom. If I click it again, you see that the number keeps increasing. Now let me explain you this in a little more detail. So this function here is an anonymous function, and this function will only execute once this event is fired. So when we clicked this button, then this click event was triggered, and then this function was executed. Now you can cut this function, and you can create this function separately, and then store that in a variable, and then refer that variable here. You can do that as well. I can say const do this equals to this function. Okay, and now I can take this do this function, and I can refer that here. So when click event will occur, then do this function will be called. Now we don't have to call it. Okay, don't call it. This do this function will be called once this click event will occur. So now if you save this, if you click it, you'll see the same output, I was clicked. Okay, so it is as simple as that. You take the element, you add an event listener to it, the type of event, and then what you want to do, you define that by creating a function. Okay, so after that we have submit. So this submit button, this submit event, we access this submit event on the form. So let me show you the documentation. Okay, so let's go here, and I'm gonna search for submit event. If I click it, if I go a little down, you can read it. So if you read, it says the submit event fires when a form is submitted. So submit event is used with the form. So whenever we are submitting the form, then we need to save the data. Okay, so something like that. And we can find an example if we navigate little down. So here you can find the HTML and then the JavaScript. Well, here is the example. So if I do something, if I click submit form, you see form submitted, it generated a timestamp, and it gives us a unique timestamp. So if I click submit form again, you see that each time it is generating us a new timestamp. Okay, and so let's see the code. And I'm just going to copy it, okay, because I've already taught you how do we work with form in the front end course. Okay, you can read about the example. So this example uses event target, which is form dot add event listener, to listen for form submit, and logs the current event dot timestamp. Whenever that occurs, then prevents the default action of submitting the form. So let me explain you everything in very layman term. Okay, so first of all, we are going to paste this HTML right here in the index.html file, and then let's come to DOM, and we'll have to, let's see it. So we have form, and then we have this log. Okay, so let's get it. We are going to say, I think we already have this example here, so why not copy this? So let me copy this, and I'm going to paste it here. And they have used get element by id to get the value of form and this log. Okay, so let me explain you what is happening. So we are going to add an event listener to this form. So I can say form dot add event listener. The type of event is going to be submit, and then here we can pass the function that we want to execute once this form was submitted. Okay, now here you don't have to always use function declaration. You can use a function, arrow function as well. Okay, so the more modern syntax of declaring a function, that is arrow function. Okay, so the work that we have to do is to, when someone submits this form, then the timestamp should be pushed into this paragraph. Okay, so the inner HTML of this paragraph should have the timestamp of the exact time when this submit button was hit. Okay, so when it was pressed. So here I can actually say, so if I navigate above here, you can see it says that yeah, whenever that occurs, then prevents the default action of submitting the form. What does it mean? See, when you have a form, then the default behavior of form is reloading, which means that let me show you. If I fill this form, let me save it. Let's go here, and if I fill this form, if I say something, if I hit submit form, did you see our web page reloaded? See, our web page is reloading. Okay, now we do not want to do this, so for this we will have to prevent our form from loading. Now how can I do this? Well, here comes event. So in this function, in this anonymous function that is also called as a callback function, which we are going to talk about in asynchronous JavaScript section coming up next. So here we receive an object that is called as event. So whatever event, whatever object, so here we receive an object that contains all the detail about this type of event. For example, if you want to know about the details of this submit event, you can catch that here. So here we receive an object, and mostly it is called as E, but you can call it anything. You can call it my events. Okay, but mostly it is called as E or events. Let's call it event. And then here, since the default behavior of the form is reloading the web page, we'll have to prevent that from happening. Okay, so I can say event dot, on this event method we have this prevent default function, and we'll have to call it. Now if I save this, let's come over here, and now if you try to use this form, submit form, you will see that our form, our web page is not reloading. Okay, so we fixed one thing. Now after that we have to do this. So we have to take this log, and on this log we have to insert the data of timestamps. Now where can I get that timestamps? Well, you can get the timestamps from this event object. So if I log this console.log event, you will see that we receive lots of properties on this event object. So if I quickly write something, submit form, you expand this, you see on this event, on this submit event, we have these much properties, and one of them is timestamps. So this is the value that they are getting right here, they are pushing it here. Okay, so here I can take this timestamps. So here I can say log dot inner HTML, and here I'm just going to use a template string, and then here I'm just going to say the current time stamp of the form submission is this dollar event dot time stamp. Okay, and if I save this, now if I write something, do this work, submit form, you see that our paragraph got this inner HTML pushed into it. Now if you see here, you'll see that it has used text content. What is the difference between text content and inner HTML? Well, in inner HTML you can actually completely modify the target element. For example, the target element on which we are pushing the text is paragraph, right? Now it would not make sense, but let me do it. Here I can actually pass the HTML. So here I can say that, hey, I want this to be converted into an H1. Okay, so now if I save this, you will see that we'll have an H1 inside the paragraph. So random text submit form, you see that our output is now translated into an H1. So if you now see the element inside paragraph, we have this H1. Okay, so inside paragraph we have this H1. So if you now change this to text content instead of inner HTML, then text content simply formats this entire thing. It does not parse this H1 into the original H1 tag of HTML. So if you say, what is this? Text content, text content. If I save this, let's do it. Lol, submit form. Whew. Now I can see that entire H1 is rendering. Of course, this is working. See, if I keep hitting submit form, you see that our timestamps is updating. But since we have added H1 as well, so text content simply means whatever the content of text, just output that. Okay, so this is the difference between text content and inner HTML. So I will always suggest you to use inner HTML. You have additional control by using inner HTML. Okay, so this is the submit event, and after this we have key press event. Again, key press event simply means to when you press something on the keyboard, then something should happen, and key press event is used on input object. So yeah, we already have this input type text, so let's see a very pure example. Okay, so let's search for key press event, expand this, and key press event, this one. Okay, let's not get into this, let me show you. I'm going to say that first of all we'll have to create one input button on its own. I'm just going to create input dot text. Okay, I'll say nothing, but type is text. I'm just going to give it a class of enter. Okay, and nothing. I'm just going to give it a placeholder, enter your name. We will have this input. You see, we have this input. Okay, now on this input we can actually add a key event. So first of all we'll have to get this input event itself. So I'm going to get this, so I'll have to say let's duplicate this one. Okay, and this time we are going to use query selector, and this one, enter. Okay, and the class is dot, so I will say input, and on this input we can add this event listener that is listening for key press and then do something. So I can say console.log. I'll say key was pressed, and now if you want to know which key was pressed, again you can receive that on this event. So you can call it event, and now here you can say console.log event, save it. If I save it here, if I will have to go to console. If I click this, now if I hit keyboard, I'll have to hit the keyboard. You see, now if you expand these objects, you will actually be able to figure out that which key was pressed. So C was pressed. Okay, expand this to figure out that B was pressed. Okay, so here you can log it, key was pressed. Let's use the template string. I can say key was pressed. I will say event, not like this, $event dot, the property name is key. Okay, so I can say key. Okay, now if I save this, let's go here. If I press key, now I see key was pressed A, D, F, G. Okay, so that's how you deal with key press. And same way we have these mouse events as well. For example, if I have this H1, so somewhere over here we already have this H1. Okay, so I can apply an event listener on this H1. So let's get this one. So to get this H1, we are just going to fetch it using query selector and with the ID. Okay, so like this. And now on this heading main, we are going to add the event listener that will be mouse over, and we are going to do a very simple task, that is we are just going to change the color. Okay, so heading main dot style dot, let's say color equals to orange. Okay, so now when you will move our mouse over this H1, you will see that the color will change. Okay, so did you see that the color changed? Okay, so this is DOM manipulation, the complete basics and fundamentals of using DOM to interact with the web page. Now as for now, you don't have to know more than what I taught you. Of course, I could have taught you the advanced concepts of DOM as well, but I deliberately choose to keep it as simple as I could have. This is enough DOM understanding for you as a beginner. Now in this course, we are not going to develop any major project because I want you all to first clear your concepts of JavaScript. We will take care about projects in a separate video. There I will teach you advanced DOM manipulation with some more deep concepts. For now, just clear your basic concepts revolving around JavaScript, become enough comfortable that you can understand the code on your own. Okay, let's now move on and let's now understand how the internals of JavaScript works.